The death of George Floyd has sparked an outcry with demonstrations and protests across the nation, as well as here in Western Massachusetts. Most have been peaceful, but at some, protesters and police have clashed. Carolee McGrath spoke with Dan Linskey, the former superintendent-in-chief of the Boston Police Department and the executive director of Kroll Security Risk Management, to hear his thoughts.
What happened in Minneapolis was, not just a crime and a homicide against Mr. Floyd and his family. It was a crime against our entire country and communities. The officer wasn't charged right away. I looked at that video and watched it 4 times, and it was my belief there was probable cause to make an arrest right then. And I wish that had occurred. I think that would have taken some of the tension out of the balloon that has enveloped with some concerns and violence around the country. I was talking to Steve Katsevans, who's a friend of mine, the chief of IACP. So he is the leader of the police, chief of police conferences around the world. And I got to steal his quote. He showed it to the video to his officers at the guard room after it came out and said, "If you're not disgusted by that video, please turn your badge in. We don't need you. We don't want you." So if the argument was that right or wrong, there's not a police officer in America that I know of who thinks that was not a crime and that those who were involved in it should be held accountable. Now, we've seen recently the arrests of the other officers. I think it took more time to process exactly what they did, and I think that was appropriate. You want to make sure you get it right. We don't want to charge someone that shouldn't be charged and have the case not go forward like we saw in cases in other locations throughout our country previously.
And that charge has been bumped up to second-degree murder now as well.
Yeah, I believe there was some additional information that came in along with another review of the autopsy report. And now he's charged with second-degree homicide, I believe it is, yes.
And can you talk a little bit about police training? Obviously, if somebody's in cuffs and under control, there wouldn't be a need to subdue somebody like that or to kneel on the neck. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, when someone is cuffed and they're face down on their chest, we train officers that that's a very dangerous situation. Even with nobody on top of them, the very body weight, especially in a situation where adrenaline's rushing through, can cause an issue called positional asphyxiation, where your chest crushes upon itself. You can't get enough air in, and you wind up dying and going into cardiac arrest. We've seen that a lot when people are proned out in the back of a wagon, especially larger people. So officers are aware of that to begin with, and then putting additional weight on the back and the compression on the neck certainly was not something that was ever trained in any police academy in America.
And you are the former superintendent-in-chief of the Boston Police Department. I know you were commander during the Boston Marathon bombing as well. We've seen in the aftermath, obviously, peaceful demonstrations and riots on top of that. How did police respond in this?
So police responded with anger at what they saw. That they saw an individual commit a crime while wearing a badge. And they were just as angry as others in the community were. Now they're balancing that anger with the need to make sure that protesters who are righteously saying what needs to be said, and they're not just protest. I know it appears the images are the protesters are protesting the police, but the police are part of society, and the problem in policing is the same problem in society. We've got systematic racism and discrimination inside our society that has been bubbling up and impacting people for years and causing concern, and rightfully so. And people speaking up against that are the protesters have a right to be heard and need to be heard. The police encourage them to be heard. We need to protect that right to protest, right? We've seen these events where dense numbers of protesting, counter-protesters, or terrorists even have used large crowds with vehicles to attack protests. So we've got to protect the protests, make sure that they can say their piece. And at the same time, there are groups, now they're seeming like they're organized more and more, that are not really interested in the conversation, not really interested in changing the underlying issues affecting race in our communities. They're only there to physically assault the police, loot, destroy property, and they use the peaceful protesters basically as human shields.
How do you respond to make sure that you're protecting life, you're protecting property and businesses without looking like you're being excessive. That's a real delicate balance.
It absolutely is, and it's different in Boston than it is in St. Louis, than it is in Miami, than it is in a small city in Wisconsin. There's no cookie cutter solution, and you have to work with the community you're policing, and the groups and the organizers and the indigenous leaders of your community to come together on a strategy, right? So it's not just the protest strategy; it's a strategy of how you're policing your community to begin with, to hopefully have consensus in that and make sure you're making decisions that everyone's on board with. And then once you have that, if you've got a protest that's coming, we used to, I had a lot of experience with protests in Boston where our sports championships would win. And they weren't protests, they were victory celebrations, but then they quickly would turn into riots and disorder. And we used to walk up and down with our helmets and sticks on, and we would, march in front of the places where the kids were hanging out. And the message we were sending is, we're ready for a fight. Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who want to fight us. They just needed to know where to go. And once we showed up, they knew where to go. So they would fight us and do things that caused us to have to use force against them. And there's also a bunch of, folks who don't want to fight you, but they sure want to see a good fight, and they get their iPhone and watch the action on video. We changed our tenor and tone, and I think a lot of police departments have done that around the country. So when there is protest, the first thing we do is start with our frontline officers, our community service officers, who are actually walking with the protesters, engaging them, asking them to shutting down streets, making sure they can be safe, making sure they can go unimpeded. And we engage them just as we would in any community policing issue. Then we have other units that if somebody starts getting out of hand, some of these anarchist groups or far left, right, middle, center, I don't care which group it is that's trying to take over the message and hijack, respectful protest, we will come in with motorcycles, mobile field forces of bicycles, go in, kind of separate those anarchists out from the crowd. If they're committing crimes, arrest them, and if they're not, divert them away from the people who are hopefully protesting. And then if it starts to get really violent and there's concerning, we have the officers you see in the full turtle gear, helmets, pads, who are trained to make movements as a team and deal with large-scale crowds and disorder. And part of doing that well is working with regional police departments throughout your entire community. So no one city or town can do this. You need to have the police in the surrounding cities and towns, fire, EMS in the surrounding cities and towns, and your federal partners all working together. But the most important partner in that is the community itself. There's the best way police can host a protest is when the protesters actually stand up for themselves and don't allow people to distract from the message. We saw a protest in Boston just recently, Black Lives Matter, in Franklin Park. And when it started to get tense, the protesters actually surrounded the police from some people who were looking to engage in going physical and hands-on, and protected the police so that they could withdraw and let the protest go on without any other violence. So there's no cookie cutter solution, and you might have to use quick force to get in there and deal with the person who's throwing rocks and bottles. And then it's important to back off and then get things back to normal and let people respectfully protest when they can.
And I will say at the protest in Springfield, a 19-year-old who had organized it said right on the megaphone at the beginning, we will not tolerate violence. If you see anybody doing anything, just walk away from them. So she set the tone, as a 19-year-old woman. But how do you bridge that gap and rebuild a relationship? Obviously, that has been certainly challenged between police and the community.
Yeah, you build it a day at a time, a relationship at a time. And, police also have to listen and change. I was a police officer, and when I went up to the rank structure, I remember a report coming out from I think it was the Lawyers for Civil Rights, saying that we racially profiled individuals in Boston. And I remember when I first read it, I was, that's not true. I never went out of my police station and said, I'm going to get people because of the color of their skin, the ethnicity, the sexuality. I never said that. I drove down the street. I answered the calls that I responded to, and I did what I was supposed to do for our community to keep it safe. So if you're saying that we racially profile people, then we must be racist, right? That's how you take it. So when anyone's called that, you put your back up, your neck, and that's not true. And you fight against that information. But when I had some time, it's a little further up in the ranks, and my job was to deal with the issues in a more policy and procedure issue, I realized that if you look at the data, we do disparately impact the community. And I started to do more research on that. And one of the things I found is that we are a part of society, and society itself has systematic racism in it. If you look at a number of events where police have been called and engaged with people of color in situations that are adversarial, was it the police officer who was driving down the street and got out of their vehicle and engaged the individual? And that there are certainly those cases as well. But how many of those are as a response of a 911 call, where somebody calls 911 and says this person's acting suspicious? We saw that in New York just recently in the incident with the gentleman who was trying to enforce the law to have dogs on leash in the park, and the woman began to call the police and accused him of threatening and assaulting her when she was the one in violation of the park's regulations. So when the police respond to that call, we've got to get information. We got to ask both sides. We're the enforcement authority, but was it our racist bias that caused that confrontation, or was it societies that brought police, who were the enforcement arm, I guess, to the event? And that happens more and more. I'd like to see some studies on that. I think we need to educate not just police. We need to train and educate the police in how we do business, how we interact. We also need to educate the public and the community on how they have biases and how we all need to deal with our unconscious bias, our conscious biases if we have them, and then figure out a solution going forward, because it's not gotten better. We've seen this before, where we've seen marches and issues and cities burn, and the hope is that we've learned something and we move forward for a better society where we don't have these issues, and we're not there yet. And we certainly have to figure out what are the action steps beyond a protest that we can move forward and put into place that can change it.